so offended that I wasn't impressed by his trophies. I wasn't, even then. You know, and we're talking about this was 2001. This was 14 years ago. I was not impressed. You know, and actually they were deer heads, and I would imagine that he used the meat to feed his family. But nonetheless, I didn't want to see that hanging on the wall. That doesn't impress me, not at all.
Right.
No. But, you know, I was looking up some information online because I read a lot of things about veganism and vegetarianism, and I'm sure that you have gotten this multitudes of times. And I have to ask you the question, what do you say to people who say, well, if we didn't eat meat, like cows would overrun the earth? I've finally gotten to the point where I cannot laugh when people say that.
I get harassed a lot because I'm a vegetarian, but this is my stance on it. We don't have the local farmer anymore that just kills a cow and sells them at a market. We have these massively produced, huge farms that kill animals inhumanely. And a perfect example of this is, I want to say, a chicken farm in South Carolina that just, you know, they take the live animal while it's still alive and cut off their beak with a machine. The animal is still alive. And they do this, they do thousands of chickens a day. You know, we even have these big farms in New York State that massively slaughter animals. It's not like the local farmer who kills one of his cows and sells it to you. These are these animals, or you know, the animals that are taken to the slaughterhouse. These animals are killed in mass production.
Yeah.
And
a lot of times I say that man has lost respect for the animal. Now sees it as just a money-making machine.
Yes.
You know, I read something earlier this week, and I actually lost a significant amount of 2 nights' sleep after reading this. And when cows are exported, when they are exported in mass quantities, a lot of times a slice of a chili pepper is placed in the cow's eye. The burning sensation in these cows' eyes keep them on their feet. And because they're not lying down, these ships or trucks can be packed with larger quantities of animals. And these animals travel like this upwards of 4, 5 days, sometimes even longer. And, Tammy, I got to tell you, and I know you're tortured because you're an empath. I'm an empath, too. I have got to tell you, for a moment, I couldn't breathe. I could not imagine to live on a planet where people do this.
Yes.
Who would do that?
Yes.
You know, what kind of a psychopath came up with that? I mean, who woke up one day and said, if we torture these cows like this, we can cram more on the ship?
Yes. And that's what you like to do. They like to cram these animals in small pens and slaughter them. Not humanely either, inhumanely.
Right. Well, I got to tell you, I'm heartbroken that this happened to Cecil. But I think the plight of the animal is in everybody's mind right now. In conversations all over the world.
Mm-hmm.
And as much as this is heartbreaking and it's gut-wrenching and it should have never happened,
right,
I think people are going to begin talking about this.
And I agree, and I posted about this recently. I posted that, Cecil was, killed, and it's very sad, and I couldn't sleep for days about him being killed. It brings attention to trophy hunting, and I believe God has a purpose for everything, and I believe that Cecil, this shows the world what trophy hunting is like and coaches are like, because no one was really taking notice, and now people are taking notice. The dental office was shut down. You know, this Walter Palmer's workplace was shut down. You know, and, you know, speaking of Walter Palmer being a sociopath, I was sent court documents how someone took him to court for sexual harassment. Some employee took him to court for sexual harassment in 2008 or 9, I believe. So this proves just what type of individuals are trophy hunters.
Right. A questionable mindset, to say the least.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm sure you've seen this too, especially on social media, because a lot of what we learn about our world does come through social media nowadays.
Right.
Somebody posted, somebody I follow and read pretty much everything she posts. Somebody kind of attacked her on Facebook saying, you know, there's so much in the news and there's so much conversation about Cecil. No one is thinking about the starving children. Has everybody forgotten that we have millions of children who do not have enough to eat? And her response was classic, because nobody has forgotten about that. And when, you know, when us crazy vegetarians and vegans go off on our rants, which we know occasionally we do, I know I do, but the amount of resources that it takes to raise 1 quarter pounder that you can pick up at the drive-thru at McDonald's, just those resources could eliminate a lot of the starving children. So you know what? We haven't forgotten about them, because we're campaigning for them. You know, we might be doing it in a different method than somebody might approve of, but we are still campaigning to reduce starvation.
And that producer could spend that money feeding the starving children in Africa. Like
Absolutely.
That $5,000 could feed 2 villages. Could buy bags of rice for them to live on, or crops, that viable crops that could sustain them for a year, not a few meat scraps that they're given after the kill.
Absolutely. It could be used to develop clean water resources for these countries that are really at risk, because so many children die because their water sources are basically toxic.
Right.
You know, kids are, you know, drinking water out of these puddles that you and I step over.
Right.
I mean, the resources are just not being directed properly.
And HIV medicine, AIDS medicine is really expensive in Africa. $55,000 could help pay for AIDS medication for someone in Africa, which is, you know, AIDS is rampant over there.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, when they can't get basic resources like food and clean water, clearly those people, like you say, those villagers are going to struggle to get something like, you know, medications that control HIV.
Right. And
control the symptoms and allow them to have some quality of life while battling a disease like that.
Right. And Corey Knowlton, who spent $50,000 to kill a black rhino, you know how many villages that could feed for a year?
A lot of them.
Just throwing them a few meat scraps from his kill, that could have fed a lot of villages for a year. So,
I know.
Tell me again how your kills are feed in villages, or how it's all in the name of conservation. What happens when all the lions are gone? Imagine the ecosystem when all the lions are gone. So the ecosystem when all the lions are gone and they don't have their natural, all those pests that will become very increase. You know, all the rabbits that the lions kill, the rabbits that are going to go eat the crops. You know, that they are the rabbits.
You know,
exactly.
And I don't think people realize that at a global scale, that everything on this planet plays a role in the ecosystem. When you keep stripping away one species at a time, there have to be long-range effects of doing that.
And, you know, the Lion Whisperer, if you ever watch his show, ever watch his videos on YouTube, he said that the lion population has decreased, that when he was going across the savannah, that this used to be full of lions, and now it isn't.
Well, I read, I was doing some research for the show, and a couple of days ago, and I actually read that the lion population has seen a reduction of 60% in the last 30 years.
Yeah.
And a lot of this can be attributed to poaching.
Yeah.
You know, this is not a villager going out into the wild to hunt an animal to feed his family.
Mhm.
You know, and this is not even legal hunting. This is poaching.
Yeah.
Which, you know, legal hunting, what a strange phrase. But, you know, there is, I don't know if you saw this story on this woman, because actually in my next life, I'm going to take far better care of myself, and I'm going to be a poacher hunter. I don't know if you've read about this woman. She is a poacher hunter, and I can tell you who she is. And she is, I believe she's former military.
Oh.
She's a former U.S. Army soldier who fought in Afghanistan.
Yes.
And she is part of an organization called the Vet Paw. You know, and I don't know if you watch Jimmy Kimmel, but I watched Jimmy Kimmel the other night. I was actually surprised to see someone like Jimmy Kimmel actually get very emotional about the death of Cecil, you know, this beloved lion in Africa, and encouraging people to donate money to Oxford University, to donate money to these conservation groups. But this Canessa Johnson is this woman's name. And she is part of VetPaw, which is Veterans Empowered to Protect African Wildlife. So, and she actually works to, well, basically she's hunting the poachers. You know what? There's no sugarcoat and spin on that. She is hunting the poachers.
Right.
And, you know, I mentioned earlier in my show that poaching is not, you know, punishable by 10 years at Club Fed.
Right.
Punishable in Africa by death. I mean, if I was a dentist Palmer right now, I think I would be pretty nervous. Yep. Yeah. Because I can't imagine what they'll do to him if they do extradite him, if he does face charges for what he did.
Right.
You know, I don't know if they consider it poaching, but I think when you lure an animal out of a protected area, you know, clearly they knew what they were doing.
Yes, I agree.
You know, clearly they knew, especially the safari guides.
And
clearly they knew what they were doing.
Walter Palmer has also been in trouble for killing a black bear before, illegally. So this is the first time he has done this. He was on probation for killing a black bear. Illegally.
Yeah, I think I read that it was punishable by like up to 5 years in prison, and he actually got off what we would consider fairly easy, you know, having, you know, just getting probation.
Right.
But I will tell you something, he might not get in trouble again if Africa has their way with him.
Yeah.
So, well, You know,